I've been seeing something that's kind of disturbing pop up on a lot of videos and recipes recently. When we're cooking steak, we're trying to make sure it's as tender as possible. I've got some other videos on my channel about tenderizing steak. In fact, one of my best videos ever is about tenderizing steak. So I'll link those down below, go check those out. But I'm seeing some of you use a tenderizing method that's downright dangerous. Let me show you what you shouldn't be using to tenderize your steaks and give you some alternatives to make sure you have the most amazing steak whenever you're cooking in your backyard. This is called a jacquard. There's similar styles and brands, but basically you're taking needles and puncturing the meat that you're trying to tenderize. You just push down on it. And don't get me wrong, I have this for a reason. It's a great tool for chicken and even pork, but you can't use this on steak. There's reasons why the FDA has certain specific temperatures for cooking recommendations on different cuts and styles of meat. The problem is the FDA doesn't take into account anything to do with food quality. But let me try to explain to you why they suggest 165. And if you cook it to 165, you can use your jacquard all day long. The point when beef and steaks can be exposed to bacteria is during the butchering process, transport process, or packing process. And that's the surfaces of the meat. It's almost like a mold, if you think about it like that. The mold grows on the outside and it doesn't grow on the inside. Steaks aren't always exposed to bacteria, but in case they are, we need to sear them really well on the outside. Then everything on the inside is gonna be safe. Same kind of example with dry aging. If you've ever dry aged or seen a piece of dry aged meat, on the outside, all the dry aging happens and you see that crust that forms. On the inside, it's perfect. Well, what does that have to do with our little needle device here? Well, if you take your jacquard and push down on it, what you're gonna do is take whatever's on the outside of the steak and push it inside. Sounds great when it comes to spices and seasoning, but if we're talking about bacteria or other things that we don't want to ingest, that's when we get into a problem. Because if we push bacteria that would normally die at 165 degrees Fahrenheit into the middle of the steak, where we're only cooking the steak to medium, let's say 130, will it get you sick every time? No, of course not, because you don't know that there's any dangerous bacteria on there now. However, your chances of getting someone very sick go way up whenever you use a jacquard on a steak. Can you use it on chicken? Absolutely, because you're cooking the chicken to a safe temperature all the way through. Some other things you may run into when using a needle tenderizer like this on steak is you could change the texture of the steak. And if you have a wonderful steak, you don't want to turn it into mush. You just want it to be tender and flavorful. So you don't need a jacquard to make that happen on most steaks. Now, I did a dry rub tenderization on this steak. I patted the surface of the steak dry and then put my seasoning and my salt on there and let it sit in a refrigerator uncovered for about 3 hours. That helps to make sure we're gonna get a good sear, and it helps to make sure that the tenderization and texture is what we're looking for. I wanna recommend that you use some alternative ways to tenderize your steaks. Use a marinade. That's probably the best way to get some tenderization and add flavor at the same time. Some type of acidic marinade is perfect for steaks. In the tenderization video link down below, we use things like pineapple, which works beautifully with steaks. Salt is another wonderful way to tenderize steaks. Just a salt brine, a dry salt brine, kind of like I did here. The basic definition of dry aging is tenderizing the steak by removing some moisture. This allows the enzymes in the meat to break down the connective tissue during the dry aging process, which increases tenderness and flavor. Now, one of the key things for making sure your steak is tender as well as juicy is making sure you let it rest after you cook it. Speaking of cooking, let's go ahead and throw this thing on the grill. The PK360, a steak cooking machine. There is no better way to cook a steak than on a grill like this. That even uniform distance from the coal bed to the grates. Now we're gonna go indirect. Oh yeah. We're going indirect because it's so thick. So I'm gonna reverse sear this, bring it up to temperature nice and slow, and then we'll throw it on the hot coals to finish it off. I got the foil on the bone to protect the bone from burning. Lid down, 550, 600.